Hi, my name is Chell Miller. I'm the Communications Director at the New York State Coalition Against Sexual Assault. Thank you for joining us for Defending Criminalized Survivors and Ending the Criminalization of Survival. This offering is part of the Ending Violence Without Violence virtual training series, a collaborative effort of the New York State Coalition Against Sexual Assault, Seven Dancers Coalition, and Interrupting Criminalization, Research in Action. Learn more and access resources and recordings from past events at www.endviolence2020.com.
Today's guest speaker is Mariam Kaba, an organizer, educator, and curator who is active in movements for racial, gender, and transformative justice. She's co-founder of Survived and Punished, founder and director of Project NIA, and researcher in residence at the Barnard Center for Research on Women, where she co-leads an initiative called Interrupting Criminalization, Research in Action. She's also a co-organizer of Just Practice Collaborative, a training and mentoring group focused on sustaining a community of practitioners that provide community-based accountability and support structures for all parties involved with incidents and patterns of sexual, domestic, relationship, and intimate community violence. Today, Mariam is going to introduce us to ongoing efforts to support incarcerated and criminalized survivors and the work to end criminalization of survival. And Mariam, I'm happy to pass it off to you.
Thanks so much, Shell, for the introduction. Thank you also for all the background work to make this happen. Yeah, happy to be here with all of you. And thank you for being here. I'm really so grateful for the partnership that we've developed over the past few years, actually, with NISCASA. I won't go into the usual issues that I have with the funded anti-violence field at this point, but NISCASA is a kind of a standout exception to the rule that we found. I'll talk a little bit about how difficult it's been to work within the funded anti-violence world, focused on the issues that I focus on today. So I'm happy to be here with all of you this afternoon, coming to you from Lenape Land in Manhattan. Before going any further, though, I would want to share an urgent call to action with everybody. The water at Bedford Hills and Taconic prisons here in New York State is undrinkable, and the prisons aren't distributing potable water, and we aren't allowed to send water into our loved ones inside. I'm asking everyone within the sound of my voice today to commit to taking action in support of our incarcerated comrades tomorrow. We want you to help us make calls to demand the return of safe water now. And I'm going to put into the chat a link to Survived and Punished New York's statement of what has been happening at Bedford and at Taconic for those of you who are interested in knowing more about this water situation. I will also put a link in the chat to our Phone Zap toolkit that provides you with a script, telephone numbers, and other ways of getting in contact with the administrators at the prison and the elected officials and others who absolutely need to immediately address this issue. If the water is not good, and we're hearing various things about what's happening in the surrounding community and a change in water supply, and that's the reason the water tastes the way that it does and is burning people's skin, that's one thing. But not even allowing people to send in potable water so that our folks can drink and take care of their needs is egregious. It is violent. It is unsurprising because this is what prison is: inherently violent, inherently inhumane torture chambers. So a lot of what I'll be talking about today is going to, I hope, encourage you all to understand that we have to be in solidarity with our incarcerated comrades on a daily basis. that we have to pay attention, and most importantly, that we have to take action. So it's really important that you take action. And if even 100 of you who are on today make a phone call or send an email tomorrow, that will make a huge difference. Thank you so much for being willing to, support this and take on this issue with us. Okay, now let's get on with this session. Next slide, please, Chell. So there's going to be a list of names that appear on here. And I'm going to ask you to pay attention to the names and wonder if you recognize any of the names on this list. And if you do recognize any of the names on this list, put them in the chat, please. Any of the names you might recognize of people who are on this list. People have Joanne Little, Centoya Brown, Centoya Marissa, Centoya Cece McDonald, Joanne Little, Marissa Tekunzi. Thank you, Brescia Meadows, Inez Garcia, Kai Peterson. Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for putting down the names you recognize. Nanhee Jo. Excellent. So there are names on this list that you all recognize. And it isn't by accident, obviously, that you recognize these names. These are names of criminalized survivors of violence. And these are names of people who, in some way, had defense campaigns or defense committees, formal or informal, come together to lift up their names, to tell their stories, and to press for their freedom. And that's really what we're going to be talking in large part about today. The plight of criminalized survivors and criminalized survival, and what we do to actually address the issues that this brings up, and how we basically launch freedom campaigns to free survivors, all survivors, and ultimately really to free them all. So that's going to be the gist of what we do today. I want to ask Chell to put the first poll up if you are able to, so I can try to get a better sense of who's here today in the room. We're doing a couple of poll questions. The first one is, are you currently working with or otherwise supporting survivors of violence with criminal records, or ones who are currently incarcerated? Yes, no, I'm not sure. And then the second question is, have you participated in activities, actions to help free criminalized survivors of violence? In other words, attended or participated in a protest, taken part in a letter writing campaign, gone to a political education event, created art, engaged in court support. Perhaps you've participated in a phone zap. And if you haven't, perhaps you'll do so with us tomorrow. So feel free to respond to the polls, and then Chell will offer us a sense of what the responses were so that we can see where we all are.
We've got about 75% of people who've participated. Some folks, if you haven't updated Zoom or if you're on your phone or tablet, might have issues accessing the poll. If so, feel free to respond in the chat if you'd like to. We'll give it another minute or so, maybe less. I've still got responses trickling in. We're at 86%. How do you feel about moving forward, Miriam?
Yeah, we can move forward, sure.
And here are our results. You should be able to see this in a pop-up window.
Excellent. So a lot of you are currently working with or otherwise supporting survivors of violence with criminal records and ones who are currently incarcerated, about 48%, 41% no, and 10% not sure. So about an even split here, and that's really wonderful. So many of you who are on this call are doing this work, and it's an opportunity for those of you who are on the call who haven't done the work or aren't sure if you are, to start doing it. There's never a better time to start than this minute. And then have you participated in activities and actions to help free criminalized survivors of violence? And I love to see that 62% say yes, 38% say no. The 38% of you can change that tomorrow by taking action and helping us make these calls to Bedford and Taconic. So again, never a better time to take action than the moment that we actually can. So thank you so much for responding to that, those questions or those responses. So my name is Miriam Kaba. Chell introduced me briefly. I use she, her pronouns. I don't like to appear on camera, so I'll be using slides and a photo for this presentation. I'm an organizer and an educator whose work has really focused, and I was just thinking about this the other day, that I started doing anti-violence work in 1989. Particularly, and I don't mean anti-violence in the general sense. I started doing that earlier, but anti-gender-based violence work in 1989 when I joined the Women's Center at my college and began to work on the crisis line, the rape crisis line at that point in time. And I have been in and out of formal anti-violence organizations and informal community spaces doing this work ever since. So I don't even want to, guess on how many years that has been. But I am committed. I'm committed and I am determined. Committed to the consistent support of survivors of violence, committed to engaging those who cause harm, and determined to actually end gender-based violence, not to manage it better, but to end it. Which kind of forces us to take a different action and a different organizing tact than if we were just trying to manage violence. So that's just a little bit about me. Next slide, please. When I use the term gender violence today, I want to be clear on what I mean by gender violence. I am really going to be relying on a definition that was developed by an Argentinian coalition, Ni Una Menos. As they define it, gender violence has many facets. It is domestic violence, but also the violence of the market, of debt, of capitalist property relations, and of the state. The violence of discriminatory policies against lesbian, trans, and queer people, the violence of state criminalization of migratory movements, the violence of mass incarceration, and the institutional violence against people's bodies through abortion bans and lack of access to free healthcare and free abortion. And I would add to their definition, the violence of ableism. So when I am talking about gendered violence or racialized gender violence, this is the definition that I mean, an expansive one, and one that touches upon all the different institutions that have a role in enacting, reproducing, and maintaining gendered violence. Earlier this year, I was part of a workshop where the facilitators showed a video that I co-produced with Hope Decter of BCRW, the Barnard Center for Research on Women, and Dean Spade, about Marissa Alexander's case. You all mentioned, some of you mentioned recognizing Marissa's name when I offered that opening list. So I just want to go to the next slide, Chell. Let's take a couple of minutes to watch the video.
Marissa Alexander is a survivor of domestic violence from Jacksonville, Florida.
So we need to have the
9 days after giving
sound a
birth to
little
her
higher. Thank you.
premature child, Marissa Alexander is a survivor of domestic violence from Jacksonville, Florida. 9 days after giving birth to a premature child, she was confronted and threatened by her abusive estranged husband. In self defense, she fired a single warning shot upwards into the ceiling to ward him off. She was arrested, jailed, prosecuted, and convicted of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon by a jury after only 12 minutes of deliberation. Prosecutors asked that she be sentenced under Florida's 1020 law, which meant that she would serve a 20-year mandatory minimum sentence. More people around the country began to organize around Marissa's case and demand her freedom when her story became known after George Zimmerman killed Trayvon Martin and wanted to invoke a stand your ground defense that was denied to Marissa. Her supporters helped publicize her case, held protests and events, raised funds for her legal defense, and supported her through her probation. Her case brought attention to the criminalization of domestic violence survivors who fight back against abusers. Grassroots organizing and good legal defense led to Marissa's case being overturned on a technicality. State's attorney Angela Quarry decided to retry her case and threatened Marissa with 60 years in prison for defending her life. In November 2014, Marissa accepted a plea deal for time served, plus 65 more days in jail and 2 years of probation under house arrest. Marissa Alexander was finally released on January 27, 2017. She has founded the Marissa Alexander Project to advocate for other survivors of violence who are criminalized for survival. Many people like Marissa Alexander are in prisons all over the United States, doing time for defending themselves and for surviving. Learn more about how you can support other campaigns for freedom and justice at the Survive and Punish website.
Thank you. So sorry that I don't know what happened with the sound. It was very low, but there was a link to the short video that was posted in the chat, so you can take a look at it when you would like at that point. My point in just sharing this video is that, as you can see at the end of the video, we included the names of 3 incarcerated survivors: Paris Knox, Takunzi Green, and Kai Peterson. And I'm happy to share that as of this year, all of these criminalized survivors are now out of prison. In each case, local participatory defense efforts, formal and informal, played a significant role in ensuring their freedom. Our focus in this session today will be on participatory defense campaigns and local organizing to free criminalized survivors of violence. As Chell mentioned earlier, I want to make sure to let you know that we will be discussing violence today. We will be discussing sexual, physical, emotional forms of violence. I invite you all to take care of yourselves this afternoon. This is a difficult topic and it may bring up lots of emotions. Please do what feels best for you. Take breaks, stay hydrated, do what you need. This session is specifically rooted in the experiences of Black women, trans and non-trans, women of color, and gender non-conforming people who are disproportionately criminalized. White women are also impacted, but they are not centered in my remarks today. I'm going to leave time for some questions at the end, but please, again, drop your questions in the Q&A box at any time during the session, and I will try to check them during the break, which we will have a 10-minute break, I hope, or a little less than 10 minutes, and I will check them and talk about it at the end as well. Next slide, Chell.
Marissa Alexander is a survivor of domestic violence from Jacksonville, Florida.
Thank you. So if you've heard me speak in the past, you may have heard me share Celia's story. Black women's resistance to racialized gender violence and oppression has been really unevenly documented. But there are stories that I think should be told, and hers is, to my mind, an important one to share. And I know Many people, especially younger organizers, have heard me discuss Celia's story, and you'll hear, those of you who are hearing about her for the first time today will understand why I share her story before I dive into the moments today of what's happening in this current moment. So on June 23rd, 1855, after enduring 5 years of sexual violence, Celia, a 19-year-old Missouri enslaved woman, killed her master, Robert Newsom. Newsom was a 60-year-old widower who purchased Celia when she was 14. On the day of her purchase, he raped her on the way to his farm. By the time she killed Newsom, Celia already had 2 of his children and was pregnant with a 3rd. She had allegedly started a relationship with one of Newsom's enslaved workers named George, who became her lover. And George is said to have insisted that she end her sexual, quote unquote, relationship with Newsom if they were going to continue in their relationship. Celia approached his 2 adult daughters and implored them. She approached the 2 adult daughters of Newsom, her master, and implored them to ask their father to end the sexual assaults. But I think you would not be surprised to learn that he continued and no one could protect her. So she confronted Newsom herself one night when he came to force yet another unwanted sexual encounter. She clubbed him to death and then burned his body in her fireplace. And so at first, when people from the family the next morning were looking for their father, Celia denied that she knew where he was. And then she denied, when they found out he was dead, that she had killed Newsom when she was confronted about it. Next slide. Later, however, she is said to have confessed to the murder. And what you have up on the screen right now is supposedly her signed confession. But obviously you can tell that Celia was not able to write, and this was not her writing, because you'll see next to Celia an X. It says her mark. So that is how she signed her name, with that X. So her court-appointed defense lawyers suggested that a Missouri law permitting a woman to use deadly force to defend herself against sexual advances extended to slave as well as to free women. Next slide, please. According to Missouri law, it was a crime to take any woman unlawfully against her will and by force, menace, or duress compel her to be defiled. A homicide committed while warding off such a crime against one's person then was justifiable under that law. Therefore, when it was time for both the prosecuting and defending attorneys to present the judge, Judge Hall, with proposed instructions for the jury, Jameson, one of Celia's defense lawyers, asked that the jury be instructed, next slide, please, if they believe from the testimony that the said Newsom at the time of said killing attempted to compel her against her will to sexual intercourse with him, they will not find her guilty of murder in the first degree. He also asked that the words any woman from the Missouri rape statute that I quoted earlier embrace slave women as well as free white women. Of course, you're not shocked when I tell you that Jameson's proposed instructions challenged Missouri slave law, which held that since the owned woman was property, what we would view as the rape of an enslaved woman by someone other than her master was actually only considered trespass. So according to author Melton McLaurin, who wrote about Celia's case, the legal quandary posed by this definition meant that an owner can hardly be charged with trespassing upon his own property. Judge Hall refused to present Jameson's self-defense instructions to the jury. In spite of a vigorous defense, on October 10th, 1855, Celia was found guilty and ordered, next slide, hanged by the neck until dead on the 16th day of November, 1855. And if you will remember, I said before that Celia was pregnant at the time with her third child. We don't know if that child was George's or her master, but she'd already had 2 children from Newsom prior to that. So either during or shortly after the trial, it's said that Celia's pregnancy ended in a stillbirth, but that's contested. We don't know for sure. Some unidentified but presumably outraged Callaway County residents decided that they would, quote unquote, kidnap Celia from jail just before her scheduled execution. And they did that because they wanted to give the Supreme Court of Missouri a chance to weigh in on the guilty verdict. So they took her from her cell along with one other person who was jailed at that time as well. And then they returned both of them once the date of her initial date of execution had passed. So her initial date that she was sentenced to die was the 16th of November, 1855. They brought her back after that. So after an appeal of the case failed at the Missouri Supreme Court, Celia was eventually, next slide, Celia was eventually hanged on December 21st, 1855. And this is a piece that appeared in the New York Times that came from the Fulton Telegraph, which is a paper in Missouri at the time. So Celia was interviewed by a Fulton Telegraph reporter on December 20th, which was the day before her execution. Next slide, please. She said, "As soon as I struck him, the devil got into me, and I struck him with the stick until he was dead, and then rolled him in the fire and burnt him up." So while Celia was not considered a person under the law and could therefore not be raped, she did have enough agency to be judged a murderess and punished for her act of resistance. Next slide. So Celia was in fact judged to have what I have called no self to defend. Celia's story is the foundation for our discussion about criminalized survivors of violence. Her legacy can undeniably be traced in the lives of Black women, girls, and gender nonconforming people today, which is what I hope you will be able to see the continuities in those experiences, even as there are also some ruptures. Next slide, please. So I remember the email that brought Brescia Meadows' story to my attention on August 5th, 2016. It was when my friend and co-founder of Survived and Punished, Hijin Shim, had sent that particular email. She shared a link, next slide, to an article from Fox News 8 in Cleveland with the note, "FYI, so horrible. Noticed the GoFundMe was taken down because GoFundMe is a piece of shit. Anyway, so anyone know organizers or DV people in Cleveland, Ohio?" With that pointed email, a few of us got curious. Next slide. The article's headline read, "14-year-old accused of killing father. Family says girl is hero who saved them all." So the accompanying package included a TV news report where I first saw a photo of 14-year-old Brescia smiling with headphones around her neck. And let me tell you that 14-year-olds do not routinely kill their parents for no reason. And I think all of us know this to be the case. So on July 28th, 2016, 14-year-old Brescia Meadows was arrested for allegedly killing her abusive father in Warren, Ohio. Brescia grew up in a home where her father terrorized her and her family throughout her short life. Brescia, her siblings, and her mother were all abused by the father over many years. Now, Brescia tried to run away from home, and family members tried to take her out of the home. However, law enforcement refused to allow her to escape and threatened to charge family members, including an aunt who was herself a cop, with kidnapping if they took Brescia out of the home to safety. When police investigated the abuse in the home, they refused to question Brescia outside the presence of her father. And let me tell you, what useful information do you think they gleaned from such an interrogation in front of her father, her abuser? Neighbors reported that Brescia's father routinely brandished his gun against his family and even against the neighbors. Prior to the shooting, Brescia's father had previously threatened to shoot the entire family, and many people were aware of the abuse, including teachers and counselors at Brescia's school. Instead of receiving compassionate emergency care, Brescia was criminalized for self-defense. Prosecutors charged her with aggravated murder and sought to try her as an adult. After surviving a childhood of severe violence, Brescia was facing a potential life sentence in prison in Ohio. Like many girls, Black girls, negotiating their survival, Brescia's attempts to escape domestic violence and seek help were blocked by multiple systems that failed to support her, including the police and Child Protective Services. Once arrested, Brescia faced disproportionately high rates of prosecution and incarceration for being a Black girl who defended her life. Once incarcerated, next slide, Brescia joined the 84% of girls in juvenile detention who have experienced family violence prior to incarceration. Additionally, 31%, this is low in my opinion, experienced sexual abuse, 41% experienced physical abuse, and 39% experienced emotional abuse. Brescia's story reveals the powerful pipeline between girls' experiences of domestic and sexual violence and their forced entry into carceral systems. Brescia was targeted for criminalization because of her efforts to survive violence beyond her control. The topic of sexual violence in the lives of girls and young women and its connection to future incarceration is sometimes referred to as the abuse to prison pipeline. In order to interrupt that pipeline, then, particular attention must be paid to the physical and sexual abuse histories of girls, young women, and gender nonconforming youth. In Brescia's case, there were whispers that we heard that in addition to the physical and emotional abuse she suffered from her father, he also sexually abused her. Later, Brescia would actually write about her experience of surviving sexual abuse. And I'm going to put in the chat a link to an article that was published by Brescia that were basically a love letter to her younger self, and was published, let's see here. Was published last summer in Essence Magazine, and I put the link to her letters there, her writing. And I'm going to read just one part of what she wrote. Content warning for and trigger warning for violence and suicidality. She writes, "Dear Brescia, it is not your fault, young queen. You were neither defended nor protected. They failed you and let you down. They didn't listen because the system never does. It is not your fault. Do not hurt yourself. You have so much potential, and every ounce of pain you endure will be used to make you into a strong, beautiful woman. You may be scared, but don't allow yourself to let fear overpower you. Your life matters. As you scream to God, wondering why you were given this life, just remember how Grandma taught you not to question his power. Things are the way they are for a reason. You have a reason, and you deserve to be defended and protected." Life contemplation, age 15. I lay in my cell 28 to be exact, contemplating suicide. Once again, I'm searching for reasons to live, but all I got are reasons to die. And going through molestation, watching my mom get beat, new bruises every day, I couldn't take it anymore. And I made the choice that led me here. Sometimes too shook to say what happened in my own thoughts. I shot him. I killed my dad. Why didn't someone just listen when I asked for help the first time? Why did it go this far? Why didn't he just stop when I pleaded, when we all pleaded? I didn't want to, but I felt like it was my last resort. I swear I tried everything else I could. Why did this have to be my life? So I'm sitting here, contemplating suicide in cell 28, searching for reasons to live. So I'm just, yeah. By the time a small group of us began to inquire about the case, Brescia had already secured pro bono legal representation. But it was clear that this was not going to be enough to spare her from potentially spending the rest of her life in prison. Something more was needed. After connecting with a local Warren, Ohio-based organizer who was able to contact her family, our small ad hoc defense committee went to work to demand her freedom and to bring Brescia's case to national and international attention. Next slide. A defense committee or campaign is a grassroots effort to secure the freedom of a person targeted for criminalization through community organizing, political pressure, community education, legal and media advocacy, and other strategies. Defense committees and campaigns have a long history that spans most of the 20th century. They have been an integral part of social movement organizing in the United States and beyond. Defense campaigns have commonly been used as a form of resistance to governmental political repression against radical and progressive movements, including racial justice, labor, indigenous sovereignty, and anti-imperialist struggles. Social movements have a legacy of building a quote unquote people's defense to save the lives of their members who become political prisoners targeted for execution or incarceration. And during the long Black freedom struggle of the 20th century, activists also campaigned for people facing the death penalty or life imprisonment for crimes they didn't commit, or for physically defending themselves from racial and sexual violence. Next slide. We took a lot. Go to the next slide, please, Chel. Okay, let's stop. Chel, the slides aren't moving. Can you hear me?
Yep, sorry, folks.
So as we get the slide situation figured out, we took a number of specific actions to free Brescia. And so I will just share those. Should I just keep going? Okay. So I'm just going to keep going and we'll see if the slides can get fixed. So we took a number of specific actions to free Brescia. We created a petition to drop charges against her. We organized mass letter writing to the prosecutor to release her immediately. We solicited media attention. We invited supporters to send postcards, letters, and books to Brescia. We promoted book drives and delivered thousands of books by women of color to incarcerated youth nationwide. We raised money for legal experts and emergency family support. We raised awareness about the abuse to prison pipeline for Black girls and women by producing a curriculum that was used at teach-ins and events across the country. We protested, we organized vigils, we solicited and circulated powerful artwork. We uplifted survival and freedom campaigns for other survivors that people could, tap into. We wrote poetry and songs. We stormed Twitter. We organized court support for Brescia's hearings. So all of those things were part of the work that we did to try to make sure to keep her case in people's eye and to pressure the prosecutors not to basically, railroad her. And it was really important to do that. And if you want, a lot of the work that we did is archived at freebrescia.com. And so you can go there and see a lot of the artifacts and all the work that we did in order to be able to support Brescia at that point in time. So as you can see, as part of an effort to free Brescia, we organized calls to action and then coordinated and publicized widespread decentralized actions into an organizing force to be reckoned with. Supporters across the world demanded care and resources, not cages, for Brescia and all criminalized survivors of domestic and sexual violence. And I'm seeing here my friend Santera in the chat saying the Free Brescia campaign and website were crucial in developing the campaign to free Crystal Kaiser. Yes, Crystal is also another survivor that folks can find more information about online. Yes, Santera, thank you for that. And thank you for your work on the Crystal Kaiser. And yes, absolutely, things are connected to each other. So I'm wondering if I should share my own slides. Thank you, Erica. Okay, so Chell, can I have, you're working on rejoining. Can I have, is there any way, Artesia, that you can make Erica, my friend Erica Christensen, a host who's on the webinar right now?
And not a problem, Miriam. I'm gonna actually try to pull up the PowerPoint, but yes, if you prefer to have Erica, we could definitely do that.
Okay, because Erica's right here and in the chat, and Erica has access to the PowerPoint. If Erica can be made into a host. Because I would hate for folks to not be able to just have to hear me talk without being able to follow along. So I'll keep going because we're gonna have a break very soon. So I'll keep going and we'll figure it out at the break. So, all right, everyone. Thank you for just staying along. Technology is a real thing. So again, I wanna say that we began to see results through our organizing. In December 2016, prosecutors decided not to move her case to adult court. She would be tried in juvenile court. So 25 to life was off the table. She turned 15 and if convicted, would likely spend the next 6 years incarcerated in a youth prison. So while 25 to life was off the table, she was still now facing a potential sentence of being convicted if she was of spending 6 years in a youth prison. Then in May 2017, Brescia accepted a plea deal that was offered, which included a year of incarceration with 10 months of time served and then 6 months of incarceration in a mental health facility. When released, she would serve 2 years of probation. So that was the plea deal. You will notice that I use the term incarceration when referring to her time in the mental health facility. The Free Brescia Defense Campaign's position was that true care cannot and should not be delivered in the context of punishment. In fact, because Brescia wanted to be placed in the treatment facility that she had briefly been moved to while in detention and under suicide watch, which was private, her family had to come up with $70,000 to cover her mental health incarceration. Let me say that again. $70,000 for 6 months of incarceration in the mental health facility. The Defense Committee worked to successfully raise those funds. In February 2018, Brescia was released from the private facility that cost $70,000 for the 6 months that she was incarcerated there. She went home to complete her probation. She is now off probation as of last year. She graduated from high school and has been taking college level courses and contributing as part of Lifted Voices to organizing so that other young people will not have to face what she did. So I think that, I want to point out the importance here of committed, relentless, coordinated collective action on behalf of individuals and generally the class of people who we're supporting. And to say that that work that we did together and continue to do together is critical work. And when we come back, what I will do is we're going to be on a break. I'll take about 10 minutes. We'll come back at, yes, it was Lifted Voices. We will come back at 5 o'clock. And at 5 o'clock, we will talk more specifically about Survived and Punished, the work we do, how we do that work, why we do that work, what are the assumptions that undergird that work. I hope you will come back for that because I think it's important. And I think there are lessons in our work for other groups, and there are lessons we can learn from other groups. So let's take 10 minutes. Oh, there's Kelly's on. Hi, Kelly. You might want to put the yeah. So what I want to do is take that break and then we will come back at 5 o'clock. I will play some music and hopefully we'll be ready to go. All right, everyone. Thank you. I'll go back to the playlist.
Time is right. I'm gonna pack my bags and take that journey down the road. 'Cause over the mountain I see the bright sunshine, and I want to live inside the glow. I wanna go to a place where I hear nothing and everything that exists between here and nowhere. I wanna go to a place where time has no consequence and oh yeah, the sky opens to my prayer. I wanna go to beautiful. I wanna go to beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I wanna go to beautiful, beautiful. I wanna go to beautiful, beautiful. Please understand that it's not that I don't care. But right now these walls are closing in on me. I love you more than I love life itself. But I need to find a place where I can breathe. I can breathe. I wanna go to a place where I can hold the intangible and let go of the pain with all my might. I wanna go to a place where I'm suspended in ecstasy, somewhere between dark and light, where wrong becomes right. I wanna go to beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I wanna go to beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I wanna go to beautiful, beautiful. I wanna go to beautiful, sorry, I never told you all I wanted to say, and now it's too late to hold you, 'cause you've flown away, so far away. Never had I imagined living without your smile, feeling, knowing you hear me. It keeps me alive. You're shining down on me from heaven. Like so many friends, we lost the love already. And I know eventually we'll be together. Once we I never showed you. Assumed you'd always be there. I take your correction for granted, but I always care. I just love to
Okay, we are back. We are back. We are back. Thank you so much for everybody who kind of bore with us over the tech issues. They are resolved now, and the wonderful Erica is running the slides for me. Erica also is the person who made my PowerPoint, so thank you, Erica. So appreciate you. I am not a PowerPoint person. People who know. So thank you for that. Next slide, please. We are coming back to talk about Survived and Punished and our work. And kind of, after giving you a grounding and kind of the historical lineage of the work, and then a little bit about some of the work we've done together as a group, I'm going to get into a little bit more about our kind of the focus of our work and how we do what we do, or why we do what we do. So let me just see if I can pull that up here. So in 2016, I, along with other comrades, co-founded Survived and Punished, which is a national formation that includes survivors, organizers, victim advocates, legal advocates, attorneys, scholars, currently and formerly criminalized and incarcerated people. Survived and Punished organizes to decriminalize efforts to survive domestic and sexual violence, support and free criminalized survivors, and abolish gender violence, policing, prisons, and deportations. And I want to say, we came together, we started the actual formation in 2016. We came together the year before. We were at the 4th convening of the Color of Violence conference in Chicago, put on by Insight, Women and Trans People of Color Against Violence at the time. And this was, we provided a workshop that was talking about the defense campaign work that we'd been involved in to free Marissa Alexander. And at that particular session, we met Stacy Suh and Hijin Shim, who became co-founders of Survived and Punished. They both used the kind of template that we had put out into the universe of the defense campaign to free Marissa. They used that in a campaign to try to free Nanhee Jo, who was a survivor of domestic violence, who was being criminalized and having her child taken away from her and put into ICE detention. So they used that template. So we got together after that workshop and talked, and it was like, let's kind of do the thing where we pool our resources. We're doing these individual pieces of work all around the country and some people other parts of the world, and we need to kind of find a way to bring those efforts together, and we'll be stronger together if we can, kind of marry our resources that way. So that's how we started talking about coming together, and that was in 2015. And then the whole team came back to Chicago from all around the country. At the time, the groups that came together to form Survived and Punished National were the Stand with Nanhee Defense Campaign, the Chicago Alliance to Free Marissa Alexander, which is now since called Love and Protect, the National Free Marissa Campaign Mobilization Effort, and the California Coalition for Women Prisoners. Of those groups, the one that had been around for decades before was CCWP. And so it is through that kind of, our connections that way that we demand the immediate release of survivors of domestic and sexual violence and other forms of gender violence who are imprisoned for survival actions, including self-defense, failure to protect, migration, removing children from abusive people, being coerced into acting as an, quote, accomplice, and securing resources needed to live. SNP has affiliates in New York City. So we have an SNP New York affiliate. We have a Chicago affiliate through Love and Protect. And we have a California contingent that does work statewide in California. SNP California and New York have prison visiting projects, and when those can safely be restarted, we hope to safely restart those. SNP New York also has an Inside Outside newsletter that is in the tradition of No More Cages, Through the Looking Glass, some of the old, incarcerated newsletters that were feminist in nature in the 1970s is where we take our inspiration. And we have that in newsletters called Free Survivors, and people can pick that up. Importantly, we have a commissary fund where we offer commissary to our members, our inside members at New York State prisons and some jails. And I want to just suggest to those of you who can to definitely donate to the commissary fund. Commissary is incredibly important to the lives of incarcerated people. We have a mass clemency campaign called Free Them New York, which you can find more information about on our website. We have an anti-prosecution working group that just put out a terrific zine helping people to understand the oppression of prosecutors and how they work against survivors, actually, when in fact people in the funded anti-violence world think that prosecutors are their friends. And we organize defense campaigns for people. And some members of SNP New York are working on a defense campaign right now to free a woman named to support a woman named Tracy McCarter. People take on various projects along the way, and we support each other along the lines of trying to do that by amplifying messages, talking with each other, talking on each other's, supporting each other's efforts in various kinds of ways. Our next slide. Our work at Survived and Punished is in the lineage of the radical feminists whose politics found their expression in something called collective defense, which is a term that was coined by historian Emily Hobson, and who adopted an organizing strategy of opposition to US state violence. And these were feminists who used their politics of collective and mass defense to challenge the intersections of gendered violence and racialized criminalization. Next slide. These are feminists who would say, in the words of former political prisoner Susan Sachs, "My feminism does not drive me into the arms of the state, but further from it." So just as our forebears did, we at Survived and Punished believe that creating participatory defense campaigns to support the people made most vulnerable to criminalization is essential for educating the public, including prison reformers and abolitionists, about the racial and gender terror of criminalization and incarceration. We know that campaigns which uplift and defend Black women and gender nonconforming people who are charged with violent acts like Marissa, Brescia, Tracy, Cece, and Kai, and more, are often the only means of securing their freedom. Next slide, please. They are also necessary for popular education to strengthen our movements, both by informing and improving overall movement strategies and by educating to challenge false and damaging binaries that we use to describe incarcerated people, like violent, nonviolent, and innocent and guilty. Defense campaigns can create new forms of learning and practice necessary for abolition. Next slide, please. I think, again, we believe in participatory defense. We believe in seeking freedom by any means necessary. And we believe that we are in the tradition of building new forms of abolition through this kind of work. I will get more into our model in a minute. So, again, by organizing to put campaigns like those supporting people in immigrant detention, those criminalized for sex work, and those targeted for transphobic violence in conversation with each other. That's the thing about SNP's work. We are putting all these things in conversation with each other. We believe that through doing that, we can actually better understand how gendered violence and criminalization actually operate. We think the siloing of the work is actually to our detriment and is part of the reason we cannot eradicate violence, right? Because we don't have a great analysis of it. We're not doing the work needed to get at the root causes of these things in order to be able to uproot those in order to transform the conditions we need so that we can get to where we want to go. So these are efforts to address criminalization of survivors that have and are taking place, and this is the part, outside of traditional domestic and sexual violence spaces in communities across the country. As I mentioned earlier, we have found it traditionally very difficult to find partners and secure the cooperation and solidarity of these funded anti-violence organizations. We've actually done a lot of our work against those organizations because they did not step up when we reached out to them and asked for their support. So many times in the case of Grisha's case, we reached out to the DV coalition in Ohio, and they told us they don't do that work. Can you believe that? They don't do that work. I was like, what do you mean you don't do that work? You mean you don't support survivors of domestic violence? And we had to literally, it was another person who was part of our small ad hoc committee who knew some people in the evangelical community in Ohio. And that it was an organizer on the ground in Ohio who was connected to evangelical organizing, who was the person who we were able to reach out to, who helped us make contact with the family and make connections in Warren, Ohio, because none of us were in Warren, Ohio. So we were all over the country, in California, in Chicago, in New York, but we were not in Ohio. We needed a local group of folks because that's critical to these campaigns. You need people who are on the ground in these particular places, okay? This is very important to keep in mind. Yes, somebody's asking in the Q&A what we mean by the funded anti-violence world. Yes, it is the groups, because, okay, can I just say this? Because I think we are very confused. The world. People will say to me, the mainstream anti-violence organizations. And do you know who the mainstream anti-violence organizations are? They are your grandmother around her kitchen table, your best friend who held you while you cried when you were sexually assaulted and brought you food for weeks after that. That is the mainstream of the anti-violence movement. Do you know why? Because the vast majority of people who are harmed never go to social services, to the cops, to the system at all. We act like the only response to be exorcised about and to get concerned about are these systems, and the social services included. And I am somebody who worked in social services for a long time. So I'm not saying those things aren't helpful. I am just saying that the vast majority of people who are harmed don't access these places. So they're not the mainstream. The mainstream are the unfunded people in our communities who do intervention work around violence every single day. So I distinguish between the funded anti-violence work by groups that get money from the government, from private foundations, from individual donors. I distinguish those spaces from our community-based groups and us who support each other every single day to the best of our ability and get $0 to do that. So that's what I mean when I use the term the funded anti-violence worlds. Okay, next slide, please. I want to make sure we get out on time, so I'll be skipping some things. You'll see here a model where at SNP, it's important for us, our work has been rooted in the fact that racialized aspects of gender violence and gendered aspects of mass criminalization have generally been overlooked. The prison is gendered male, while DV and SA is often racialized white. So our work rejects carcerality as a strategy for addressing harm because it does not actually attend to the root causes of violence or other social problems. We think that carcerality simply disposes of those individuals that represent these problems. And that's not a way to end violence. It might be a way to actually spend our time, managing violence. And I'm not interested in managing violence anymore. I want to end it, okay? So we refuse to exceptionalize survivor freedom, though. And I think this is important. As we organize in solidarity with other movements to end the criminalization of survival of all kinds, our definition of survivorship is expansive and inclusive. And we are not saying that only survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault deserve to be free. Our slogan is free them all. All. There's a particular reason, however, that we are uplifting survivors of gendered violence. And I think you hopefully over this last hour or so have understood why we are uplifting those stories. Okay? We are uplifting those stories because gendered violence is a nexus of carcerality, right? And that we believe that abolitionists must take gendered violence seriously if we're actually going to achieve abolition. Without taking gendered violence, racialized gendered violence seriously, we are not going to get an abolition. We're not going to abolish anything because gendered violence is co-constitutive of all other forms of violence that exist, right? And part of the reason we want to get rid of the prison is because the prison is a reproducer and a maintenance, maintains gendered violence. The prison itself is a form of racialized gendered violence, right? So we offer that analysis to the broader abolitionist movement. Next slide. S&P is a formation that embraces abolition feminism. Abolition feminism is a liberatory vision of a world free from all forms of violence. I say this again, all forms of violence, including the violences that are produced by carceral logics and systems of surveillance and policing and punishment and colonial erasure and global militarism. Again, we are looking at a form of understanding the world that is not siloed, but understands these violences as co-constitutive of each other, as deeply related to each other. And that if we don't address them, we're not going to get to the world we want to get to. So for us, abolition has to be feminist at S&P, and feminism has to be abolitionist, right? Because on the one hand, a feminist analysis of prisons and policing, i.e. criminalization, enables us to expand the scope of our abolitionist politics to include all areas of carcerality. This includes the policing of motherhood. This includes the carcerality of mental health provision, the policing of sex work, the carcerality of child protective services, the institutionalization of disabled people, the criminalization of reproductive justice, right? An abolition, a feminist analysis of carcerality and criminalization enables us to see all of those things as of a piece with each other. Not to think this is just happening here for no reason, but to analyze it together and bring them up together and link together so that we're stronger in our fight to eradicate these things. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, an abolitionist intervention into feminism is critical because a lot of feminists are carceral as fuck, okay? And want to rely on punishing systems to supposedly end violence. And this title of this work that we partnered with Niskasa on is Ending Violence Without Violence. So we do not believe that we are going to end violence in terms of a transformative justice perspective on things by enacting further violence. It's just not going to work, folks. It's not going to work. You cannot rely on the inherently death-making institutions of the state and think we are going to get where we need to get. It's not going to happen. I'm here to inform you about that. So an abolitionist intervention into feminism insists that we cannot focus on addressing vulnerabilities through criminalization, because criminalization is always racialized. Next slide. It is always gendered, and it is always heteronormed. So a focus on criminalized survivors of violence really pushes us to ask this question, which I think should be the animating question of all feminism. How do we create safety outside of carceral logics? How do we do this? This is part of my life's concern. How do we create safety, true safety, and wellness outside of carceral logics? So this is why we say that abolition has to be feminist and that feminism has to be abolitionist. I could get into a whole workshop, which I've done in the past, that's all about abolition feminism, but I will just uplift that the great Angela Davis and Gina Dent and Erica Miners and Beth Ritchie have a book coming out soon, published out of Haymarket Books, called Abolition Feminism. And I am excited about this book, and it's going to be so helpful and useful to our thinking and to our organizing. So I don't have time to break down all the ins and outs of abolitionist feminisms, but go to the book eventually when it comes out. I want to close us out and then get to a few questions. If you have questions, put them in the chat, please, so that the Q&A box, so that I can get to it. Next slide, please. So some of our comrades, I work very closely with many people who are part of Moms United Against Violence and Incarceration, and I'm a co-founder of Love and Protect. And yes, you can, don't worry about saying, people like get, so they're like, how many friggin' formations and organizations and projects have you founded and co-founded? There's too long of a list, but I really look at the example of one of my greatest touchstones, Ella Baker, who for years people would chide and laugh about the fact that Ella Baker belonged to like dozens of organizations in her lifetime. And I didn't understand at the time what that was about. I do now. And yeah, but anyway, I do belong and I have started many organizations. And part of that is because I think organizations are dynamic and, you know, they shouldn't exist forever. We use them to the extent that we need to do the work we need to do. And when that work is done, we can move on. But there are also other reasons for that. But I love this Declaration of Independence from prisons and policing that for the 4th of July, Moms United and Love and Protect put together. I think it was last year, might have been when they did this. And so I want to read a part of it that is really relevant to me. And I will do that now. So the original text in the declaration, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they offer an improved version. We hold this truth to be self-evident, that there can be no equality, no inalienable rights until all people live in freedom and until the pursuit of health and happiness is met with equity and abundance. We hold that there is no democracy in a white supremacist, misogynistic, ableist, transphobic, capitalist patriarchy. We hold that no bodies will be truly safe and free until the lives of Black and brown, trans and cis women and non-binary POC are free and safe. We hold that police, prosecution, and prisons protect and defend white supremacy, and that the criminalization of survivors of gender violence is not incidental, but a primary function. We hold that the work of well-being and safety is grounded in community, in non-coercive spaces where accountability and healing are not restricted by legal liability or fear of punishment. We hold that reforms of these intractably violent institutions most often serve to broaden their reach and entrench opposition to a long-standing, growing demand for abolition. I love this piece. Think about creating your own declarations of independence in your spaces. What do you believe? What do you need? What do you want? Okay. So next slide, please. I put some resources here, which will be shared to you by NISCASA soon, when they share out all of the video for this. I want to also, which I had forgotten to do on that slide, I want to include a reading list that was put together by the Know Your Nine group. It's an abolitionist reading list created and managed by Know Your Nine, a survivor and youth-led campaign committed to ending gender violence in school. And some of the things that they include in there are readings and resources and other things that you can access if you're trying to get a basic understanding of abolition, what it means. I always tell people that I became an abolitionist because I'm a survivor, because I am anti-violence, because I'm a survivor of sexual violence and rape. That is what informed my abolitionist politics. And I don't think people who don't know anything about abolition really understand that. But ultimately, that's really what happened for me. And I just want to put that out there. So we have 5 minutes. I'm happy to extend an extra 5 minutes for the people who want to stay on so we can get to these questions that people have put, because I know we stopped a little bit and had some tech issues. But I just want to say, please, again, I'm uplifting and ask for you to help us tomorrow, support our comrades, our incarcerated comrades at Taconic and Bedford around this water situation. I would love to see at least 100 calls. I'm going to put the toolkit for action once again in the chat and encourage folks to please contact all the different players on here. Really appreciate it. And again, I will feel so like this conversation was not what it should be if people aren't motivated to act as a result. I don't think we can spend a lot of time consistently all the time, just paying attention, like being bystanders. We have to act. I hear, okay, so some of the questions here. Why do you use gendered violence instead of interpersonal violence or power imbalance violence, since these are racist, ableist, not just gender? I'm talking about gendered violence here because I'm talking about gendered violence. It's not just interpersonal violence. Like there's something about the fact that it's rooted in oppression of gender that matters quite a bit. So that's why I use that term. Colonial erasure is a very specific intervention in the concept that colonialism is something that people, kind of maybe understand in a systemic way, but it's more than that. It's the notion that people don't even consider colonialism as a form of structural violence and oppression. So that's why I use the term colonial erasure, because people are erasing the notions of colonialism and they don't keep those at the center of our analysis of these isms that we want to address. So that's why I use that term.
Mariam, would you like me to read out some of the questions?
I'm looking at the ones that are in Q&A, but I'm not looking at the ones in the chat. If there were
sure.
Yeah.
There were a couple questions that I think could be merged, some from the chat too.
Okay. Yes.
Ideas about so some are kind of specific to like how do you abolish like smaller jails, right? Things like that. And someone's asking about what safety options have been developed and can be accessed. So I guess there's a broader question for some folks who are just kind of learning.
Mm-hmm.
What are the safety options that like folks are developing already that exist for folks who are working for abolition?
Yeah, there's just so many. I mean, people are always engaged in figuring out how to do reduction of harm. And so I think, you can look to various kinds of organizations that are doing this work, the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective. You can look towards, Collective Justice out in Seattle. It's doing some incredible work around accountability and people who cause harm. Common Justice does some great stuff. I mean, the list is just too long. And it's not like for lack of having people doing this work. I think it's a lot of lack of imagination, I think, for some folks. And I think we're just, oppression puts a ceiling on our imaginations. And so people think like there's nothing going on or there's nothing else happening. There's always, I just promise you this, there's always somebody doing something. Are they doing it well all the time? Maybe not. But there are people trying constantly, new things, experiments. We just put a site out, Project NIA and Interrupting Criminalization, called millionexperiments.com. Go to millionexperiments.com. Expand your imagination about what we mean by violence prevention. Part of the problem I saw when I was doing working at Sanctuary for Families, I worked at Friends of Battered Women and Their Children in Chicago and at sanctuaries in New York. And I've done so much. I've done volunteering at coalition sites around anti-rape coalitions. So what I found was like, it's people's understanding of what violence is so limited to like the burning bed and not to the structural forms of violence like wage theft. like these are not violences. Right now, the mass death related to COVID-19 is less scary to people than supposedly a murder spike that is really contested, right? Like it's not actually, it's not uniform. People aren't experiencing it directly, but like hundreds of thousands of people are dead. Okay. They don't have a website. Mothers United Against Violence and Incarceration don't have a website, but the link to somebody can put the link to their declaration in there. That would be great. So like, there's just, what is the Million Experiments? Our Million Experiments is our attempt to say like, when people are training barbers to do mental health conversations with community members, do you know that is a form of violence interruption and anti-violence work? Do you know that street fridges are a form of anti-violence work? Do you know that the people in Detroit who have the Green Porch Project, whereby they just kind of sit outside on the porch in their community and engage young people in activities, do you know that that is anti-violence work? Do you know that, the list is just, there are so much out there. It's not just like a one-to-one counseling appointment and some fucking, orders of protection. Like we have to push ourselves. We've got to push ourselves to understand that these things that are being offered on offer, just because something is on offer doesn't mean that it's the only thing or that the thing that we should be focused on only. Okay. So just like, again, like find all the different ways, because people are creative. People are trying so many things in their local communities. It's up to us to do the same, to take the leap, to make that move. Okay. I'm just going to offer also that we're doing myself and my friend Lara Brooks put together a toolkit called Whose Security Is It? And it's to help kind of nonprofit-y or community groups to take law enforcement out of those spaces, particularly groups that work with youth. And we have the toolkit. It's available for people to use, but we're doing an event on September 23rd. You can go to Project NIA's social media sites and we'll be able to share it with you at that point. The link is live now. We will post it this week. But anyway, we're doing trainings around that. We're doing this really terrific several week long training that you can't apply for it anymore, but we have 60 people from around the country in pairs going through a transformative justice Skillshare, where we are working together on learning de-escalation skills together and learning mediation skills together. Why? Because more people need to have these skills to actually practice them and use them in your communities, not to outsource other people to take those things on, right? Capitalism has de-skilled us so deeply that we have to reclaim our skills. We have to reclaim getting involved. For real, we have to stop thinking that 911 is the recourse for things. In fact, most people don't even call 911. So we are already doing this stuff. We just have to uplift more of the examples. And the last thing I want to say before I just shut it down today is that it really matters. You know, we're in this moment now where the courts, which, you know, a court-only strategy was a bad move always. But for the reproductive justice side, and I know a lot of people of color, gender nonconforming folks have been yelling about this for decades. The strategy around Roe being so central to this conversation of reproductive justice. And I'm going to tell you that go out and see what is happening with the national networks of abortion funds and the ways that they have created these auntie networks and the ways that these abortion funds on the ground locally are doing this magical intervention work, making sure that people will be able to have safe abortions if they need to and want to, but also connected to other things. There's the Mississippi Fund, or the Yellow Fund, or I think in Texas, but then there's a Mississippi fund that I am a donor to. And they do a lot of things like provide doulas to people, abortion doulas, but also doulas to help people who are having their children. They are providing people with formula. They are taking on the concept of mutual aid at its best. At its best, everybody. We know what to do, folks. We know what to do. Let's do it. Take action. Be anti-racist. Be anti-oppressive. All right, y'all? We can do this. We can do this. We can free us. We will free us. We have no choice. So thank you for taking time to be here. I hope you're motivated to go out there and do more and engage other people and force them to do more too. Keep it going, everybody. We can do this. We can do this, okay? Thank you so much. Thanks to Niskasa for having me and for being a partner on this Ending Violence Without Violence series that we all worked on together. I hope you all go back and look at all the resources they share and look at all the videos from previous speakers and panelists. And then more importantly, take it into your communities, y'all. Thank you.